Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Listen, starting off by saying, I'm not going to sit here and bore you with another session, lecture, workshop about all of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. However, one of the things that I get people to think about when understanding children and young people in the environments in which I work is looking at it through the lens of Maslow, but adding on. You heard me say from a number of the videos previously that I talk about intersectionality. I talk about the apparatus that I utilize in order to make it make sense. And that's why I use words like intersectionality. And I've mentioned even previously, one of the kind of theoretical ways in which I do that is I use kind of CRT, critical race theory. And I guess Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the way that I look at it is I get people to kind of understand what are the needs of our children and young people in our society, connect to the reality. You've heard me say before, but I'm going to say it again if this is the first time you've come to the video. I talk about young people saying things like, I want money. Young people saying things like, I'm bored, I don't like education. Young people saying things like, I don't know what I want to do in my future. I'm lacking purpose. I'm struggling. They may say things like, you know what? I want to be involved in criminality. I want to be involved in violence. I want to join a gang. I want to be a part of this particular group for whatever reason. And whilst I speak to loads of young people, trying to understand their reality, I try and look at that through the lens of needs. And that's the only reason why I'm talking about Maslow, because you can utilize Maslow's hierarchy of needs using some of the work that I've done previously, and there will be links at the bottom that will enable you to probably see some of my thinking around that to help you to ascertain how to kind of assess the needs of children and young people in a contemporary context within the United Kingdom. So one of the things that I look at in my research, and I talk about this a lot for those of you that have ever done any sessions with me before, is that when you look at the different needs that Maslow essentially talks about, I talk about the top three that within the UK, based on all of my research that I've conducted so far, when we're talking about, enabling young people to have the space, enabling young people to see their purpose, enabling young people to, really understand, the kind of self-actualization as a country, despite the fact that we're struggling with finances, despite the fact that, we're sporadically spending and putting plasters on the wounds to respond to the core issues and problems of our young people. Despite all of that, there are organizations, and some of you are probably watching this, that do amazing work with children and young people. And first of all, I just want to applaud you and tell you to continue to do that work. However, one of the other videos I've mentioned from that historical context of the changes from a political sphere and an economic sphere, and I have to also add on COVID-19 within that, there's been fundamental changes with young people. There's an increase in knife crime, an increase in counterlines in criminal exploitation, an increase in sexual exploitation, an increase in young people being manipulated and coerced to join religious groups, to join far-right groups that are involved in extreme behaviors. There's an increase in young people being used for a wide range of different types of things. And despite all of that, whilst we're able to do really well in engaging young people in creating spaces, there's two fundamental things that I talk about that we've ultimately missed. And one of those things is finance. So if you think of let's say the first stage at the bottom of the pyramid, the kind of physiological needs, and I don't need to go into all of that because that's what you should be doing in your own time. I'm not here to answer all of your questions. But when you think about the basic needs, when you look at it, I interpret that as things like money. And one of the things that we've removed from not just the education system, but I think learning in general, is that we don't think about interventions with children and young people to get them to think about money. So you think, when we go back, you heard me use the word historical timeline, go back to one of our other videos when I talk about this. And previously, you may remember years ago when we used to have things like, initiatives like, the early maintenance allowance. Who remembers EMA? The days when, you'd be at college and, every week you got money, every quarterly you got a little bit of money. Then you even got bonuses while she was there. People that were in apprenticeships was making money. So at the time when I was getting EMA, for example, and many of my friends, I don't think people could have come to me and gave me a proposal and said, you know what, if you want to make 50 quid, do you want to jump on a train from Birmingham and make your way to London, give someone a package and I will give you 50 to 100 quid in order to do that? I would have most likely said no, because I would be thinking, well, if I'm getting my EMA, that is not an offer that I would even consider. That's just me, by the way. So when I think about it in this context, where you have young people, that them initiatives have disappeared now, we've shifted governments, those initiatives have shifted, youth services have been cut, the ways in which we work with children and young people is probably still the same in the old concept of working with children and young people. And I'm not just talking about youth work, I'm talking about education, I'm talking about all different types of systems. If our education doesn't seem to engage with the basic physiological need that Maslow essentially was asserting to in a contemporary way, how are we going to capture young people? How are we going to deter them away? So one of the things that I do within my work, and one of the things we do as an organization supporting other bodies and partners, is getting people to talk about financial literacy, getting them to think about money, what money actually means, not algebra and all the things that mean absolutely nothing to them, but give them real life scenarios, to get them to think about ways in which they can make money, utilizing things online, selling things that can actually put money in their pockets without enabling them to be in a situation or an environment where things may be a cause of concern. And then I guess the second thing which I'm going to end with is also the other need when we're talking about things like fear. I mentioned that in previous videos also as well. And one of the things that I guess that we're not engaged in terms of the last point that I just made about in terms of intervention, in terms of getting people to kind of really think about what does it mean in terms of belonging. We talk about things like young people having identity issues. We talk about young people feeling marginalized and then wanting to kind of assimilate and conform to groupings that give them safety, respect, status, that kind of normality that connects with whatever they deem to be identity. And again, when we talk about those particular concepts, I want us to think about the interventions that are out there. So for those of you that are either researchers, for those of you in the room that are students, for those of you in the room that are parents, and all of those different people that are probably thinking about, how do I understand the needs better? If a child or young person, I want this to connect to a previous video that I spoke about of why wouldn't they carry a knife, is think about what do we do for young people to help and support them with that scenario and situation. So some of the work that I do oftentimes happens, school calls us, Craig, can you come in, do an assembly or workshop with young people, but we want it to be very specific around knife crime. And I'll always ask, what do you want me to do? Give them some ideas for me to think about. And they'll be like, yeah, but for this particular session, we just want you to focus on the consequences of knife crime. And even though I'll give the suggestion and say, I think that we need a little bit more time, not just 40 minutes. But anyway, because I know the school and I'm really about helping and supporting the school, I'll always go in and deliver a particular session. And I remember one particular occasion, I had a conversation with a local school, done an assembly, it was amazing. Just as I was leaving the session, I was speaking to a group of young people, and one of them said, sir, love the session, but I still need to carry my knife. And I guess whilst that conversation took place, all I was thinking was the school brought me in to talk about this particular issue, and I ticked the box. Ofsted will be well happy. Department of Education will be well happy. But what I failed to do was meet the need of that young person. Because what that young person essentially was saying to me in conversation was, even though you raised the awareness, what I was trying to get from the conversation, which I needed more time, was for you to give me some very clear, in-depth ways in which I can keep myself safe. So all I want you to think about when we talk about the needs of children and young people is that when you're speaking to young people, number one, connect with their reality. What are they saying? If they're saying that they want more money, if they're saying that they want to hang around particular groups, rather than telling them not to, try to ascertain the why, and then start to get them to think about diversionary ways that are realistic, are practical, that can deter them away from those particular things. If they're talking about money, for example, let's think of creative ways, entrepreneurship, bringing people in that make real money in your local community, so you don't put the burden upon oneself thinking you have to solve all of those problems, which goes into the three categories at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs that are brilliant. But the two things that I think that we're not really engaging in is the money aspect, in my humble opinion. And when young people say that they're fearful, and ensuring that they're safe, they're secure, and ensuring that those basic needs are sorted. I think these things, in my opinion, moving forward, over the last 12 years, coming out of the pandemic, These are the things that I think that we need to be focusing on within our intervention. And from a research perspective, we have to start looking at what that looks like in order to make it make sense in a contemporary way. So for those youth workers, those people in the community that want to help and support, for those policymakers that are thinking about what changes need to be made, these are the things that should be shaping our thinking and how we can move forward. There may be some comments, there may be some thoughts, there may be some more questions you want to ask about that. Drop in the comment section, let us know what you want us to talk about or what you're thinking around this, and we'll move it and keep it moving.